Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the Generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Today's game is another Magic Fest Montreal installment. We have an old friend and some new players joining us. First up, all the way from Australia, Sam is playing his Marchesa, the Black Rose deck, and he keeps a Stunt Double, Shivan Reef, Wormcoil Engine, Scavenger Grounds, Chaos Warp, Thought Vessel, and Shifting Shadow. Vincent is playing his Sasaya deck, keeping Helix Pinnacle, Courser of Crewfix, the Great Aurora, Harmonize, and 3 Forests. Chris is playing his Omnath deck, keeping an Island, a Wooded Foothills, Growth Spiral, Forest, Eternal Witness, Royal Elemental, and Mystic Remora. Last but not least, Faye is playing Chainer, keeping a Bile Blight, Hazoret's Monument, Zalfnir Void, Swamp, 2 Mountains, and Sir Conrad the Grim. Faye wins the die roll and starts us off. Faye plays Zalfin Void, scrying 1 and keeps the card on top. Chris plays an Island and casts Mystic Remora on turn 1. Sam plays a Scavenger Grounds and passes. Vincent plays a Forest and also passes. Faye plays a Swamp, passing turn. Chris pays the 1 for the Remora and draws for turn. He plays a Forest and passes. Sam plays a Shivan Reef and casts Thought Vessel. This lets Chris draw from the Remora trigger, and Sam wishes he could tap the vessel to pay for it. Vincent plays a Forest and casts Arbor Elf. Faye plays a Mountain and casts Dark Ritual. Chris draws from this, and Faye uses the mana to help pay for Sir Conrad the Grim before passing turn. Chris doesn't pay for his Remora trigger, letting the enchantment go, and draws for turn. He plays a Rootbound Crag untapped and casts Growth Spiral, drawing and playing a Mountain before passing turn. Sam plays a Tainted Peak and dings himself for 1 to help cast Spark Double. It enters as a copy of Sir Conrad before Sam passes to Vincent. Vincent plays a Tap Fertile Thicket as his land drop and looks at his top 5. He reveals a Forest, putting on top of his library, and makes 3 mana using his Arbor Elf for a Courser of Crewfix before passing turn. Faye plays a Mountain and casts Ob Nixilis' Cruelty on Sam's Sir Conrad, and as Faye's copy of Sir Conrad sees its copy die, it deals 1 to each of Faye's opponents. Chris pays 3 mana for a Risen Reef, and as it enters, looks at his top card and reveals a Forest off the top, playing it. He then plays a Snow-Covered Island and passes. Sam plays a Snow-Covered Island as well, and he drops a Captivating Crew, losing another 1 life to a Shivan Reef to help pay for the red before passing turn. Vincent draws and reveals a Forest off the top, playing it and gaining 1. He then pays 4 mana for a Harmonize, drawing 3 cards, which he has to reveal to the table due to the Courser. Vincent then moves to discard down to 7, and he pitches a card and passes turn. Faye drops a Hazoret's Monument and passes. Chris brings out Omnath in his main phase, who resolves after going around the table, and as it enters, deals 2 damage to Vincent's Arbor Elf. Before resolving the trigger, Vincent untaps a Forest. And with the elf dying, Chris then moves to resolve the Risen Reef trigger, but it isn't a land, so he has to put it to hand. Chris then plays a Myriad Landscape tap, putting a counter onto Omnath's ability, and then casting Nature's Lore to find a land. He grabs a tapped Breeding Pool and puts another +1/+1 counter on Omnath. Sam plays a Blood Crypt, taking 2 to have it come in untapped, and then he brings in Marchesa the Black Rose. Heading to combat, the Captivating Crew goes at Faye for sitting on the throne, and it gets a +1/+1 counter from the Dethrone trigger before hitting Faye. Vincent draws and reveals an actual rocket launcher off the top of his library. He plays a forest for his land for turn, gaining 1, and he passes to Faye. Faye pays 3 mana for Chainer and resolves the Monument trigger, discarding a Profane command and drawing a card. Faye then casts a Traveler's Amulet and passes. Chris plays a forest and draws as he has 8 lands from Omnath's trigger, and also gives Omnath another +1/+1 counter. Chris then plays a Royal Elemental and resolves his Risen Reef trigger, drawing a card. He then pays 2 mana for Myriad Landscape, cracking it and finding 2 basics, and getting 2 landfall triggers and 2 more Omnath triggers as the lands enter. He upticks Omnath by 2 more counters and puts the steel triggers on Chainer and Marchesa. Responding to the targeting, Faye uses Chainer's ability to discard a card, and this triggers Sir Conrad to deal 1 to Faye's opponents. And Chris also draws 2 from Omnath's triggers. Heading to combat, Omnath goes at Vincent, who's currently on the throne, and Omnath gets the Dethrone trigger stolen from Marchesa, dealing 9 commander damage to Vincent. Chris then has to discard down to 7, and he passes turn. Sam draws and pays 3 in his main phase for Kari Zev's expertise, targeting the Royal Elemental. This steals the Elemental and has the added benefit of returning all of the stolen creatures to their original owners. He has nothing to cast with the second half of the expertise though, and loses 1 life to help pay for a Shifting Shadow on his captivating crew. The table then tries to find a way to kill the Elemental, but the fact that it has flying and most of the other creatures do not presents a big problem. Thankfully though, Faye closes the discussion by saying not to worry about it. Heading to combat, the crew and Royal Elemental head at Chris, who is now on the throne, and they each gain a +1/+1 counter before dealing 10 damage to Chris. Sam then passes, returning the stolen creature, and Vincent casts Sprouting Vines at the end of turn, getting 2 copies of it, and finding 3 basics for his hand. He then reveals Harrow off the top of his library. Vincent draws the Harrow and reveals Into the Wilds. He casts Harrow, sacrificing the Fertile Thicket to find 2 more lands, and gains 2 life. He then moves discard down to 7 and passes to Faye. Faye cracks the Traveler's Amulet to find a land, and plays the Swamp. Faye then pays double black for a Bile's Blight, and targets Chris' Royal Elemental to take it out. This in turn triggers Sir Conrad's ability, dealing 1 to Faye's opponents. Chris drops Purphoros in his main phase, and plays a tap Field of the Dead. He counts up the land names, and has enough to trigger it as it enters, making a 2/2 zombie, who enters and triggers Purphoros. This also gives Chris an Omnath trigger too, and he puts another +1/+1 counter onto Omnath and draws a card. All of this from just playing 1 land seems pretty decent. Chris then pays 4 for a Skyshroud Claim, finding 2 more lands, which trigger the field, and he gains 2 more zombies, and Purphoros deals 4 damage to his opponents. One of the lands is Stomping Grounds, which he takes 2 to have come in untapped. With Chris also then gaining 2 Omnath triggers, putting 2 more counters on his commander, and drawing 2 cards once he's done shuffling. Heading to combat, he swings Omnath at Vincent, who blocks with the Courser before Chris passes turn. Sam has his Shifting Shadow trigger on his upkeep, sacrificing his Captivating Crew to the ability. Because the crew has a +1/+1 counter on them, they'll come back at the end of his turn from Marchesa's trigger, and Sam then gets to reveal off the top. He only goes a few cards deep and reveals a Grim Haruspex. He shuffles the other revealed cards to the bottom of his library before drawing for turn. Sam then plays a Sulphurous Springs as his land drop, and he looks at the life totals of the table. He then swings Marchesa and Haruspex at Faye, who doesn't block, and Sam's creatures get a Dethrone trigger, giving them a +1/+1 counter, with Faye taking 8. In his post-combat main phase, Sam then loses 1 life to help cast Chaos Warp on Purphoros, and I'm getting the feeling of deja vu. Chris shuffles the God in, and then reveals the top card, a Beast Within. Sam then moves to his end step, and the Captivating Crew returns itself from the graveyard to the field. Vincent plays a forest and casts Yavimaya Elder. He then passes to Faye. Faye plays a snow-covered mountain and discards Mutilate to activate Chainer's ability. This lets Faye recast the Audacious Thief from the yard, and Sir Conrad triggers again, dealing 1 to Faye's opponents. Faye is then able to swing the Thief at Sam, which has the Thief's triggered ability going off, and Faye loses 1 life and draws 1 card. Sam then takes the hit for 2, and Faye passes to Chris. Chris untaps, and on his upkeep, Faye discards Anger to Chainer's ability. Chris then taps enough to cast a Tooth and Nail, paying for the Entwine cost, which Sam moves to counter with Disallow. Unfortunately for the table, Delay puts a stop to that though, at least for a few turns, and the counter goes to exile with 3 suspend counters on it. The spell then resolves, and Chris goes to tutor for 2 creature cards to put to hand and then to field. He finds an Avenger of Zendikar and Perforos, with Vincent sacrificing the Yavimaya Elder. With the Elder dying, this triggers Faye's Sir Conrad and deals 1 to Faye's opponents. The Avenger and Perforos then come in, and Chris counts up 14 lands. This will deal 28 damage to his opponents with just the plant tokens alone, making it a cool 30 with the Avenger included, and this is enough to finish off the table, and Chris wins the game. Game review time. So, I think unfortunately for this game, 3 of the 4 decks did not perform as optimally as they wanted to, and as a result, Chris's deck, which was firing on all gears, went unhindered for the entirety of it. This is not to begrudge Chris, as his Omnath deck is particularly spicy, and I love Risen Reef. It's such a good card, my goodness. He did go for the typical Avenger of Zendikar and Perforos win, but the game was almost an hour long at that point, and I can never fault someone for winning with a combo at that point in the game. Sam really seemed to struggle with finding lands that allowed him to tap for colored mana, and it wasn't until he got his Blood Crypt out that he was really able to do anything. That being said, I like the fact that he was able to steal the Royal Elemental and get back his Marchesa, and give back Chainer to Faye. Combine Marchesa's Dethrone ability with the fact that Shifting Shadows would get him a bunch of fancy creatures, I thought it was really sweet to see. It's a shame that Vincent's Sasaya deck didn't go off like Jalbal's deck did. He would have easily been able to win with the Helix Pinnacle, but it didn't seem like he was able to get a bunch of lands into his hand, which really slowed him down. In a similar vein, Faye's Chainer deck didn't do a heck of a lot either, and by the time that Faye had cards to bring back with Chainer's ability, the game was almost all but over. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta, and lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.